Good morning and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us on this crispy, rainy day here in Sydney, which just so happens to fall on the Ides of October. We'll be starting the webinar shortly as we're waiting for a few more participants to join us. In the meantime, I invite you to take a moment to familiarize yourself with the Q&A section that you'll see right at the top of your window, top of your screen, and where you can post your questions during the session. Meanwhile, it would be great if you can all give me a thumbs up to indicate if the audio is fine. I'd love to get a thank you so much. Thank you. All right, it looks like we have most of our attendees here with us now, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, ISO 20400 Sustainable Procurement, Using the Fundamentals to Drive Implementation, presented by Tanya Lawler, Senior Consultant, Sustainable Procurement. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we meet today. In the spirit of reconciliation, LGP acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout this nation and recognizes the continuing connection to land, water, and communities. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Before we dive in, just a quick few reminders. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to revisit the session and revisit the session later and share it with your colleagues. Your microphones have been muted to ensure the best possible experience for everyone. And if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to post them in the Q&A section above, not the chat, the Q&A section above, and we'll address them during the discussion. And finally, let me introduce our esteemed presenter and someone who truly brings this topic to life, Tanya Lawler. Tanya is a sustainable consultant specializing in sustainable procurement, a vital part of the Strategic Procurement Solutions team. As a program leader for Sustainable Choice, Tanya's focus is on providing the direction, management, and delivery of sustainable procurement services to local government. She's been working relentlessly to drive awareness of the advantages of implementing sustainable procurement and guiding and supporting councils to help them work towards procuring products and services that have economic, environmental, and social benefits. Tanya was also a member of the Australian Committee for the Development of ISO 20400, the International Guidance Standards for Sustainable Procurement. Over to you, Tanya.
Good morning, everybody. And yes, thank you, Ananda, for that introduction. So as Ananda introduced me, yes, I am Tanya Lawler and I lead LGP Sustainable Procurement Program, which is known as Sustainable Choice. And what I'm going to speak to you about today is the ISO 20400 Sustainable Procurement Standard and how it can help to embed sustainability into your council's procurement process. So let's start with, what is ISO 20400? Well, it is an international guidance standard on sustainable procurement. So unlike other standards which you can get certified against, say for example ISO 14001 or ISO 9001, you cannot be certified against ISO 20400. What it is a guidance standard or a framework for helping you to embed sustainability into your procurement process. Now, what is sustainable procurement? Well, the standard defines it as procurement that has the most positive environmental, social, and economic impacts on a whole of life basis. So in other words, it's about considering environmental, social, and economic factors when planning and undertaking procurement. So the standard provides an understanding, firstly, of what sustainable procurement is, what the sustainability impacts and considerations are across the different aspects of the procurement process, and also how to implement sustainable procurement practically. So it addresses a number of elements that are crucial to address in order to achieve sustainable procurement as business as usual. And you can see these elements listed on the screen. And they include, firstly, the fundamentals, which is about the foundational steps to set yourself up for success. Policy and strategy, so it's about committing to sustainable procurement. There's education and training, that's about enabling your staff to be able to implement sustainability in procurement. It's about stakeholder engagement, which is involving your stakeholders and bringing them on the journey with you. There's setting sustainable procurement priorities. So this is about applying risk management and different approaches to setting your priorities. Tracking and measuring. So it's about tracking and measuring your progress in improving performance. And integrating sustainability into the procurement process. So embedding sustainability throughout the procurement process. Now, one of the biggest challenges faced when trying to embed sustainability in procurement within a council is convincing everyone, in particular your decision makers. So it's those people at the top, like your GM, your executive, your councillors, that it really matters. And research shows that two main things that make sustainable procurement happen in an organisation are the existence of effective policy commitments and top-down leadership, with the single most important factor for sustainable procurement success being top-down leadership. Now, no matter how well you're doing your job, you're not going to fully embed sustainability into the council's procurement process if the people at the top aren't on board. This is also the case if you don't have effective policies in place. It's all good and well to have policies in place that have been signed off and accepted, but if they are not effective and not being enacted, then they're not really useful. Now, what I will be talking about today will address how ISO 20400 can help you bring your decision makers on board. So each year, LGP, through the Sustainable Choice Program, sends out its annual Sustainable Procurement Survey to all councils. So this presents councils with an opportunity to see how their sustainable procurement efforts are tracking against ISO 20400. And if you do participate regularly, it can also demonstrate progress over time. Actually, this year's survey will be sent out shortly. It's going to go out within the next month to all councils, so keep an eye out for that. What the survey does is it collects information on activities that are being undertaken that relate to each of those elements of the standard that I just spoke about. It's free to participate. And those councils that do participate are provided with the sector-wide results. So that's the average and median scores for each of the elements of the standard across all of the responding councils. So for those councils that would like to take the opportunity to gain valuable insight into their individual council's sustainable procurement progress, we have two fee-based options. So one is a brief one-page report that graphically presents your council's individual performance against each of the elements of the standard compared to the sector-wide average for each element. And you can see an example of the graph on this slide, and that is included within that one-page report. And the second option is that you can have your survey results used to generate an individual and confidential sustainable procurement scorecard that's accompanied by a performance report. So together these two provide an ISO 20400 health check for your council. And the report includes an analysis of the results and realistic, which is very important, realistic and achievable recommendations for progress and future improvement, particularly things that you can do over the following 12 months that will really make a difference and will make sure that some progress is achieved. And where available, if your council's participated previously, there will also be a comparison of progress from previous years included. And this is a good way to track and measure your sustainable procurement progress, and also to share the good news story, and also to get approval to do the things that need to be done to ensure future progress. So we've been undertaking this survey since 2017 when the standard was released. And over the years, we've seen many councils, many examples of councils doing certain aspects of sustainable procurement very well. And the area where councils on average do best in is policy. And many councils have incorporated sustainability into their procurement policies and procedures. But aside from that, we see most councils struggling to do all the other things that would make sustainable procurement happen well. And usually it seems to be because the fundamental step in sustainable procurement hasn't happened or it hasn't been done effectively. And when we look at implementing sustainable procurement at a council, the most important thing you can do is ensure you have the fundamentals in place. This will help to enable and drive sustainable procurement implementation. And for that reason, I'm going to focus today's discussion on the fundamentals. So when I'm talking about fundamentals, what does that mean? Well, the area of fundamentals in the standard is made up of essentially of two things. It's about defining your drivers for sustainable procurement, and it's about understanding your sustainability risks and opportunities in procurement. So by defining what your council's drivers are for sustainable procurement and then assessing your council's sustainability risks and opportunities relating to procurement activities, you're then better placed to not only gain the buy-in from decision makers within council, but to then successfully work your way through the ISO elements and effectively embed sustainability throughout your procurement process. Now, in terms of drivers in this context means the forces that are creating pressure for council to develop and carry out sustainable procurement practices. It's really the why of sustainable procurement. Now, when determining drivers, ask questions like, well, what is council trying to achieve? What are council's motivations? What is really at the heart of the decisions made by council leaders? You know, the decisions that they're already making. What influences those decisions and what are they based on? In other words, what are your council's goals and objectives? Now, goals and objectives can be specifically sustainability related or may not be. And where they're not specifically sustainability related, it's important to look for the links. You can see some of those types of objectives that councils have listed on this slide. And on the left, you'll see these goals and objectives are very clearly sustainability related. The ones on the right, not so much so, but I would argue that they all are sustainability related. For example, if you're looking at attracting and retaining staff, if you don't attract and retain the right staff to make things happen within council, then how is council operating sustainably? So you can see that, you know, and same goes for things like innovation. If you don't have innovation as a goal and objective and how that relates to sustainability, well, without innovation, we can't get more sustainable products and services, and we can't improve the way we do things to make it more sustainable. So they do. So that's how you look for the links and really show that the goals and objectives are related to sustainability. Now, where do you find your council goals and objectives? Where do you go to look for that? Well, start with your community strategic plan and have a look at what the focuses are in there. If you have a sustainability strategy, that is another good place to look. If you have a look at your council's vision statement, for example, if you have a vision statement that relates to having a thriving town centre that provides productive employment for the local community and supports businesses to grow, well, there you go. Support and grow local economy would be a driver for your council. If your council has a mission statement, you can have a look at that. Have a look at any other objectives that might be within your council, within different teams. Consider what the community expectations are. If the business or residential community have expectations about how council will respond to sustainability, highlight those expectations as very important drivers. In terms of risk management, some of the types of risk to manage include reputational risk, legal exposure, financial liability, and climate extremes, for example, like flood. Your leaders don't have to believe that climate change is human-induced, but they do have to care about how council assets and communities are affected by flood. Find out what the risks your council has already identified are and consider which of those might be primary drivers for sustainable procurement. And ensure that you involve others when defining drivers. So identify who your stakeholders are and involve them. It's not just up to the sustainability team or the procurement team. Consider all stakeholders that are involved in and or affected by council procurement activities and speak to them to find out what their goals and objectives are. Okay, so once your council's drivers have been determined, it is time then to assess the sustainability risks and opportunities for your procurement activities and link them to the drivers. So an effective way to do this is to create a sustainability heat map. Now, what is a sustainability heat map? Well, essentially, it's a risk assessment tool and it reviews spend categories against sustainability threats and opportunities. And the outcome that you get is a clear set of priorities for procurement that align with an organisation's sustainable procurement drivers. The exercise is undertaken for individual procurement categories. And you can do this for all your procurement categories, or you can really just focus on those categories where you have the highest spend, where you also get the highest impact. Now, what does it look like? Well, here on the screen, you can see an example of a sustainability heat map. So this one is for park infrastructure relating to playgrounds. Look, it doesn't belong to any particular organisation. It's just one that I've filled out to use as an example for the purposes of today. Now, heat map looks at risks and opportunities to an organisation in terms of sustainability in order to understand which are the most important and therefore where your procurement efforts are best placed. So it's used to determine where council's biggest sustainability impacts. Now, very importantly, it's both negative and positive sustainability impacts lie in relation to procurement. Now, how do you go about doing this? How do you put one of these together? Well, the most effective way is to workshop it. And that is workshopping it with all relevant stakeholders in the room. You get everybody to take the time out to do this. It's very important to ensure that you capture all relevant knowledge and information and it's also really important that those that will need to use these heat maps know about them and understand them, that the maps meet their needs and that they feel a sense of ownership and are more likely to utilise them. And that's what you're more likely to get if you have everybody in the room working in on it. And you'll increase the chance of it being implemented properly and successfully. The stakeholders should definitely include those people who work within the categories that you're assessing. And it can include people from different areas within council like procurement, asset managers, fleet, stores, sustainability, facilities managers and engineers and so on. The best way to ensure that the workshop is inclusive and collaborative and everybody gets heard is to use an independent facilitator, one that doesn't have a hidden agenda or has an idea of where things should be going. Now, look, you can do this on your own or, with a small group, or you could even engage a consultant to develop it and just hand it over to you. However, because you haven't been through that process of workshopping it with all the relevant stakeholders in the room, don't be surprised if the outcome just sits on a shelf and doesn't get used. So first step in the workshop is to look at the impacts. And you can use the templates, like this is a template found in the Sustainable Choice online resources. So they're on the LGP website, and you can access those by having a login to the LGP website, which all councils are able to get. So the heat map on the screen, yes, so it uses the Sustainable Choice template. Look, there are other templates around, and you can Google them. Most of them, however, will include all the categories on one page, on one heat map, which means that there's a lack of detail on that page on how the rating was determined. Therefore, we prefer to use this more comprehensive template, and this template is used per category of spend. So in this template, there are a number of sustainability threats and opportunities listed that you should be considering. You can work your way through these. You can see those underneath the topics heading in that column. So you work your way through them, and you can relate them to the category you're assessing and identify the potential impacts, and then make notes in the comments section about those impacts. And you can put as many notes as you want into that. Now, when identifying the impacts, it's very important to consider the magnitude of the impact. That will help you when it comes to assessing the risk or the opportunity. Also, consider what leverage council has to influence suppliers. So can you make a difference to either reduce that risk or increase that opportunity? And look for scope for improvement. So, there's a current landscape out there in the market, but is there scope for improvement? Consider, is there supplier capability available in the market to provide better and more sustainable solutions? Now, step 2 is about using a risk and opportunity rating template, which is also found on the Sustainable Choice Online Resources page, to determine the risk and opportunity level for the identified impacts. So you do this as a group, and you can see these under the scoring column. They're color coded. So in terms of risk, we have a traffic light system. So you've got green for low, amber for moderate, and red for high risk. And in terms of opportunities, it's using a purple color, and the greater the opportunity, the darker the purple. So it gives you, that sort of helps to illustrate it and highlight to you where your highest risks and opportunities lie, just by simply quickly looking at the heat map and seeing those colours. Now, step 3 is about linking the risks and opportunities back to your sustainable procurement drivers. And you can see that listed under the column Sustainable Procurement Driver. So it's where you take those drivers that you've already determined and you match those up against those risks and opportunities. And the overall outcome is this heat map, and it tells you where your greatest risks and opportunities lie, and that is where you can focus your efforts to gain your greatest benefits from procurement. It also links back to council's goals and objectives, and therefore provides a justification for procurement decisions. Now, a very important note about this is it's not a one-off process. It's important to revisit this regularly. Ideally, you would do this annually, but at least biannually. And certainly if, your council has a change in direction, for example, following an election, or there are changes in legislation, then it's a good time to review these heat maps. Now, in terms of the importance of the sustainability heat map and what the benefits are and how you can use them, so having these heat maps in place provides incredible amount of value, and it will help to make your procurement easier. It provides a clear set of priorities and directions for procurement. It informs procurement strategy and actually policy reviews as well. It informs the development of specifications, so it allows for sustainability to be addressed in specifications, ensuring it is embedded in that very important planning phase. And it guides the development of RFX criteria, its evaluation, and the weightings that you can assign to those. It also guides and it justifies your procurement decision, and it helps you get buy-in from approvers. If you're asked by management or your elected members why you have or have not focused on certain areas, you can refer back to the heat map, and it gives a clear explanation. It shows the process that you went through to come to that decision. Now, LGP has experience in facilitating these types of workshops. We've done this for councils. For example, one council that we facilitated this type of workshop for, they were then able to use their heat maps to determine their sustainability schedules and what goes into those for all their different categories of spend, and also to develop the evaluation criteria. And actually, I facilitated that workshop for them as well. Okay, so you've heard enough from me now, I think. Now I'm going to open up to all of you and see if any of you have any questions, and I'll try and answer those for you. Catherine, have we had any questions in the Q&A come through?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
We have only a few minutes left, so I will say that if anybody has any questions that we don't get to, please send them through to us, and we can respond to everybody in writing. But the question I will put to you now is: so a lot of councils haven't had a lot of sustainable procurement progress, and would there, for a council like that, be any value in doing the annual survey on sustainable procurement? Would it tell them anything?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Look, particularly if you choose the option to have the scorecard and performance report prepared for your council, because it will provide you with a benchmark which you can track future progress with, and it'll give you, it really does give you some very clear, realistic and achievable steps that you can implement over the following 12 months that will help you gain some progress, or even start it if it needs to start. And then you would have the option to participate in the following year to measure and track your progress. And that can be a really good news story to share, and with your leaders and your managers, and show them the good work that you're doing. Yep, I think that answers
great.
that one.
Thank you. So what would you do? Next question. What should a council do if they've developed their a risk plan? They know what's going on. They have an action plan, but what they're planning to do and the risks that they've identified don't actually align with the council's priority.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's where these maps also, their value comes out as well, because you've been through this process. You've had a look at what all of your council's goals and objectives are, and these are goals and objectives that they have publicly communicated as well. And you've assessed that against these risks and opportunities, and you have this whole outcome, this process that shows very clearly the justification for your procurement actions and decisions. If a councillor is questioning you, or they're asking you to go in a different direction because it's a priority that they have, you can use a heat map to very clearly tell that story and outline why you're you're not going to change your actions, or you've made the decision that you've made, and why it doesn't align with the priorities that the councillor has, but yet it does align with the priorities of your council and your community.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we are at time. I'm going to sneak in one more question, but only one. So the last question I'm going to ask is, you talked about fundamentals. What would you regard as the next most important step for councils when they're on their ISO 2400 journey?
Yeah. Okay, so what I would suggest is that the next stage would be to review your procurement strategy, or if you don't have one, draft one, to ensure that those risks and opportunities that you've identified through that process have been addressed. And I'd also suggest that you review your procurement policy for alignment as well. So that would be the very next stage, I would say.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Tanya, and thank you to everybody for joining us. And we will be posting this on our socials later, so if you missed it, you'll get to see it later. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And please do get in touch if you have any questions or you'd like to talk further about what we do here. Thank you.